Step into the super crowd, where dreams take flight. Learn to invest like a pro. Make your future bright. Impact investing, changing the game. Crowd from the world, they'll never be the same. Super Crowd Hour, come join the ride. Change the world with us, we're on your side. Super Crowd Hour, come join the ride. Change the world with us, we're on your side.
Welcome to the Super Crowd Hour. I'm Devin Thorpe. I'm your host today, and I'm excited to share with you some really important lessons about regulated investment crowdfunding. I especially like to focus on social impact, or what I call impact crowdfunding. And today we're going to talk about this woman, this entrepreneur on the screen here with me. She's just completed a crowdfunding round and she is not happy. Let me be very clear. She successfully completed a round and she's not happy. We're going to take the time to tell you why she's not happy and how we can make sure that if you do a successful crowdfunding round, you are happy. So stick around. You don't want to miss this. We are really fortunate to have on our team a young man by the name of Chandan Saha. Chandan is the producer of this show and does just a tremendous job supporting us in countless ways. Chandan, thank you very much for all you do for us. I want to just be clear today that we are talking about financial things. We're talking about money. But I want to be clear as we talk about this that this is not, financial advice. We're talking about money issues, but if you want financial advice, I encourage you to get some. It's an important thing, but this is not that. This is educational, informative, not financial advice in a technical sense. Okay. We're building a movement here to do impact crowdfunding. And one of the great ways that we do that is with a group of small angel investors who focus on impact. And we have monthly meetings every third Tuesday at 1 Eastern. And we would love to have you join us. If you're interested, visit impactcherub.com. Visit impactcherub.com to learn more and to sign up. We publish a newsletter and a regular television show on superpowersforgood.com. You can sign up for the newsletter so you never miss an episode of our regular show at, again, superpowersforgood.com, or just scan this QR code and sign up today. We'd love to have you on the participating. Recently, I wrote a book called How to Make Money with Impact Crowdfunding. This is really, I think, I've written a lot of books, and some have sold very, very well. I'm very proud of that. This book may be the best book I've ever written. It's really a helpful guide. I got a lot of help from a lot of smart people who guided me, and I want to encourage you to check it out. More recently, I've written a new guide to raising capital from the crowd, Crowdfunding Made Simple, and it includes some really helpful tips for how you can use AI to help you with that, to make it easier. Crowdfunding, one of the complaints we hear about crowdfunding is that it's a lot of work, and it is. But with AI, that can reduce the workload pretty substantially. I was doing a project over the weekend and realized that the AI tools available to me now reduced the time required for this project by about 95%. Can you imagine? 95. So there really is help and value in this book. I encourage you to check it out. Now, let's talk about why this entrepreneur is so unhappy having just completed a crowdfunding round. She's just raised capital. She has gone through all of the exercises, filing the forms and reaching out to her crowd. She's done everything, and she spent months on this process, getting ready and then executing. Now she's not happy. What happened? Most likely, she didn't raise enough money to be happy. Let's talk about this a little bit. Today, we're going to be talking about how to calculate your funding needs so that you don't end up in this situation. You don't want to end up in a place where you haven't raised enough money to make the difference for your business that you need. Now, let's talk about this a little bit. I want you to picture Goldilocks and the Three Bears just a minute. And the key lesson that we took from that is it's important to find the just right size for you. The baby bear, not necessarily the right size. The mama bear, maybe just right. The daddy bear, probably maybe too big. And you say, well, you can never have too much money. That is close to true. There are exceptions, right? The reality is people aren't giving you money. They're investing money. When we talk about regulated investment crowdfunding, they're investing money. They expect it back with a return. And there are situations where additional capital won't help you execute the business plan better. And if that's the case, when you take in more money than you need, you may just be adding a burden of repayment. And that's especially true if you're using a debt structure. So you want to be careful not to take too much. Not as big a risk, let's acknowledge, as taking too little. It's easy to create for yourself a burden, an obligation to your investors that can become daunting and frustrating if it doesn't create for you simultaneously enough capital to accomplish your objectives. And so your minimum target goal in crowdfunding needs to be very strategically calculated. In addition to asking for too much or too little, one of the problems that we see sometimes is people aren't explaining adequately how the capital will help the business go forward, right? And so you see people are not understanding what you're going to do with the money and how it helps you build a successful business. You've got to communicate that use of proceeds very clearly. And finally, it's important to look at all the other funding options to see how crowdfunding fits in to a broader strategy than just relying on crowdfunding alone. Let's take a look now. There are three primary reasons for raising capital. The first reason is asset purchases, right? You may need to buy some equipment, for instance. It may also be intangible assets. We'll talk about that a little bit. Deficit expense spending. That sounds like a bad thing, and yet that's really the most common reason for raising capital is you're spending money faster than you're making it at this point in your business, and you need some cash to fund that deficit spend. We sometimes think of that as being working capital. Working capital is a different thing, though. We'll talk about what working capital is and how that may be an important part of your capital raise. Let's talk about asset purchases first. The easiest kind of example is to think about equipment, and whether we're talking about buying farm equipment or a building or other tangible assets. It's easy to imagine I've got the restaurant kitchen on the screen here as an example. That would be an easy one to define and explain. But you may also acquire a patent. That would be an example of an asset purchase that's intangible. You may acquire a customer list, another example. You might acquire another business that included a patent or a customer list, and some of that purchase would be assigned to those assets, for instance. So asset purchases are a common part. In fact, it's pretty rare, not never, but it's pretty rare that there would be no asset purchases resulting from a capital raise. The deficit spending is really what in entrepreneur speak we call the burn rate, right? This is the amount of money we're spending each month to raise capital or to build a business that isn't generated by the business. And some startups are pre-revenue, and so 100% of the spending is deficit spending. So most of that is going to be expenses that are being incurred that aren't covered by revenue. It's all the payroll in a true startup. Pre-revenue is going to, everything. So your marketing expenses, your customer acquisition costs, those are typically going to be best described as deficit spending, or your part of your burn rate. And it's not unusual for you to have to cover that with a crowdfunding capital raise. Working capital. I want to define working capital because this term sounds a little bit like it describes what we were just talking about, the burn rate. But working capital is really, in the financial world, a more specific, narrower definition of capital that's very important, right? It's to fund things like inventory and carry accounts receivable. Imagine you're a consulting firm. After you do the work, right? That's not unusual. Well, that receivable has to be carried. You have to pay your employees to do the work for the consulting, and then you collect the money down the road. That gap in time requires working capital. You've got to buy inventory. If you're in any sort of a production business, whether you're talking about a restaurant or a manufacturing business, you're buying inventory, maybe raw materials, turning it into a finished product and selling that at a higher price. Well, you may have, depending on the nature of the business, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days worth of inventory in your warehouse, in your freezer, in your business somewhere. That needs to be funded. And then there may be other short-term assets, like in my event planning business. We sometimes have to make deposits with the caterers and with the venues for the events we're hosting. And so we need working capital to allow us to make those commitments. And then at the end, we are instead collecting the revenue at the end. And so that requires working capital of another sort. So working capital is the cash required to operate the business because of these natural, regular, ordinary gaps in time between the revenue events and the expense events that are more on the balance sheet than on the income statement. Okay, so I want to be really clear. There is no wrong answer for why you need to raise capital. I think the wrongest answer traditionally was to refinance other investors. And yet I see that very commonly in successful crowdfunding rounds now. When does it come up most often? It most often comes up in debt deals where people are asking for people to invest at 10, 11, 12, even 13%. And they're saying, we're using this capital to pay off credit cards where we're paying 20%, 25%, or 30% interest rates. So they have an opportunity to really save money on the interest expense by taking your money at 10, 11, or 12%. So uh, I really believe strongly that there is no wrong answer for why you're raising capital, but you have to be transparent about it, both for legal reasons and for building that connection, the authentic relationship with your investors so they will trust you and give you the money you need to operate your business. Okay. In the construction world, there's an old adage, do-it-yourselfers are familiar with this. Anybody who's ever used a saw pretty much knows the old adage, measure twice, cut once, right? Because once you cut a board or a table, a countertop, imagine you're cutting a $2,000 slab of granite for a piece of countertop. If you cut it to the wrong length, you are in real trouble, right? That's a real problem. So the key is measure twice, cut once. That's the adage. And the same principle applies with a regulated investment crowdfunding round. You've got to budget twice. You've got to really be careful about how much money you need before you do your crowdfunding raise. Because if you're not careful, you're not thoughtful, you're not complete in your analysis, what will end up happening is you'll complete your round, raise capital, and you'll be sad because you didn't raise enough money. So it's important to build a line item detail. Be very specific, write everything down so that every expense is considered, nothing missed. You want to be able to be absolutely sure you've covered everything. And then after you're sure you've covered everything, add a cushion. And then you've also got to be careful to be sure to include the cost of the crowdfunding raise. That is not insignificant, and I see it too often ignored. Realistically, a typical crowdfunding round will cost at least 10%, including the portal fees, legal fees, accounting fees, and the marketing costs, at least 10% of the raise, and 20% is not unusual. In fact, it's pretty common to spend more than 20%. I wouldn't encourage that, but I think it's important to plan on spending between 10 and 20% of the money you raise to raise the money. And so you've got to plan ahead. There are times when you're able to do a rolling close after a certain threshold is reached so that you can continue raising and funding the marketing expenses from cash you're actually raising. But for small offerings, it tends to be all or none. And so you've got to have some of that cash up front before you begin. And it's important to understand and plan for that as you plan to have a successful crowdfunding campaign. One of the critical things is, with almost every crowdfunding round, there are a few exceptions I've seen where they have very, very narrow differences between the minimum goal and the maximum target for the raise, but it's typical to have a pretty broad range. I want you to be really strategic about that. You need to know exactly what you're going to get and to be comfortable and confident that if you only get your minimum, you are happy you closed the round. Because if you're not happy you closed that round at the minimum, that is a big problem. If you're saying, oh man, now I've got all these investors, I have to pay them back, but I can't finish the kitchen. I can't launch my business. What am I going to do? That's a problem. You don't want to be there. You've got to make sure that you get everything you need. Maybe not all the things that would be nice to have. So picture a build out of a restaurant kitchen, a pretty basic kitchen. would cost at least $50,000. So imagine you've got the $50,000 there for the basics, and you might say, I can identify $25,000 of upgrades that would really make this kitchen function much better, allow us to do better food, more throughput, higher volume, whatever it might be. So that $25,000 difference becomes the spread, right? So you might say we need to raise at least 50,000 plus the cost of the offering, plus maybe there's some deficit spending while we're building this. So maybe we need to raise about $100,000 at least. But boy, if we could raise $125,000, that would be great, because then we could have all these extra things in the kitchen. That's what I'm talking about. But you've got to make sure that you understand that all of your needs are covered in your budget. And you know the nice to haves that you'd like to add that can be constructively contributing to the success of the business, not just whimsy. Okay. So let's go through kind of an example of what this would look like in summary, right? So in the kitchen example, we'd say, okay, we need $75,000 to finish the kitchen. We're going to spend $25,000 on a new part-time marketing staff person, for instance. We're going to add, we need $10,000 for some inventory. That's working capital. So you can see all the aspects, right? Kitchen upgrade is the fixtures, the equipment, the assets, an asset purchase. We see the deficit spending with new staff while they're coming online until the business can support the new staff. The inventory purchase is a working capital. We've got to have a contingency fund to make sure that we are covering the things that we didn't think of, and there will be things that we didn't think of. And then offering costs. It's going to take money to get a financial review done. We're going to want to talk to an attorney. So there are some expenses associated with that. And then, of course, the portal is going to take money. We talked about that. And we've got to spend a little bit on marketing. So we build all of that in. So now we know we need to raise $150,000. Okay, so that's kind of how you build your budget for your crowdfunding campaign. Now, here's a critical thing to remember, and this is just so important to remember that crowdfunding is not the only source of capital available to you as a small business owner or as an entrepreneur. And so you've got to kind of look at the whole picture and figure out, how do these pieces fit together? So let's talk about some of the other options. Bank loans work really well when you are buying tangible assets, whether we're talking about a tractor, a building, even kitchen equipment. If it's something that the bank can pick up and take away or repossess and hold title to, it's a good candidate for bank financing. Now, it typically requires a down payment and typically some track record. So a brand new startup probably isn't a good candidate for a bank loan. But there may be some exceptions to that. Certainly real estate, a first-time developer with enough down payment can borrow some money against the real estate. So it's not never for startups, but it's pretty rare. So bank loans can be, especially for businesses with a track record, a really important part. But crowdfunding can be the perfect complement, right? If you want to upgrade, make a big asset purchase, whether we're talking about a $200,000 tractor or a $300,000 building for your restaurant, or space for your restaurant or something, those kinds of things can be financed, but you may need more equity in the business in order to pull it off. That's where the crowdfunding can complement the bank loans. Uh, there's some free money out there for some entrepreneurs, some businesses. I don't want to overplay this, need to be careful, but there are a variety of grants available traditionally from the federal government. Some of that's shaking out a little differently these days. So some of that money that has been there in the past may be gone, but a lot of the private capital will continue to be there. So there are foundations that will make grants for certain social enterprises, grants for diverse founders that are somewhat underrepresented in the entrepreneurial world. You may be able to get grants. And so if you've got a social mission or other circumstances, and sometimes even just being a local business might allow you to apply for, make you eligible for a grant from local municipality or other kind of grant maker. So if you are a potential candidate, be sure to check that out. GrantStation is a tool that's available that's fairly cheap to use, and so is GrantStation, opengrants.io. These are online accessible tools where you can do a search for grants and try to match them up to your own situation. When you contribute your own personal capital to a crowdfunding or to your business, and you can demonstrate that you have put in capital, actual cash, not just time, that is a really strong signal. Now, I'm the first one to say you got to balance that against the other considerations in your family circumstance, right? You don't want to bet all of your wealth, all of your assets on the business. But at the same time, remember that being able to demonstrate that you have put cash of your own resources into the business is a really powerful sign for bankers and investors, so that it can help with the crowdfunding raise, just to be able to say we've put our own money in. For some high potential businesses, angel capital and venture capital can be a piece of this puzzle. And so you may be able to say, we're going to treat the crowdfunding round as an early pre-seed angel round or friends and family round to get us going. And then we'll do another angel round later on, or raise more venture capital to help complete our growth cycle. But you may be able to say, with a little bit of, whether it's $250,000 or $500,000, you may be able to identify that with a small crowdfunding raise, you're able to reach some important milestones that would make you more appealing to venture capitalists and angel investors looking for those super high returns. So be sure to consider that and check it out. If you are a high potential, rapidly scaling kind of business, especially in technology, if you've got some real fundamental technology that you're deploying and building, you can be a good candidate for that. So the key thing is when you bring together all these different forms of capital and they fit together strategically, this begins to really build strength in your organization, because you're no longer reliant on one source of capital. It gives you a little bit of diversity in your capital sources and helps you to build a stronger, more successful business. So I would encourage you to explore all the options. We're going to talk in a few minutes about how we can use AI to make that search a little bit easier. Now, one of the important steps, right? The whole point, one of the primary reasons for doing this calculation so thoughtfully is to really try to get an understanding of whether your crowd can meet your needs. You may be in a situation where you're able to determine, There are no grants available in the time frame that you need. Grants sometimes take a long time to apply for and receive. You may not be able to qualify for a bank loan. You may not have any personal resources to commit. You may be entirely dependent on the crowd. Let's look. Can your crowd cover what's needed? I am a firm believer that every business can raise some money from the crowd. I'm not yet convinced that every business can raise enough. So we've got to have that reality check before we proceed. You don't want to take money from people that you can't return reasonably. Okay. So in December at our Super Crowd Hour webinar, we talked about a way to estimate how much your crowd can deliver. And so I'm going to recap in this one slide an hour's presentation. So I encourage you to go back if you missed the December presentation and watch this. But friends and family, I think you can probably count on about 10% of friends and family that you ask multiple times to invest, they will, right? Explain how this works. Explain how you're going to pay them back with interest or pay them back by growing a business that will become more valuable, right? You can, as you explain that to them, along with the risks, my experience suggests 10% of your close friends and family will participate. Now, they can only participate up to the level of their means, right? So if you've got a rich uncle that has the ability to put in $25,000, you got kind of a 10% chance of getting him. So you could put $2,500 down on your potential there. But if you don't have that rich uncle, you got to be thoughtful. Okay, customers, people who are actually already giving you money, they're pretty good candidates. You could get 1% to 2% of that crowd, especially among the regular customers, to contribute to your crowdfunding campaign, and that could help you close the gap. So if you have an established business where you're already generating revenue, you are in a much better place than those of us who may be starting up a business. Okay, you may have a newsletter, and that newsletter may be all you have as a business, but you can expect a few of your newsletter readers. Really, it works out to be, 1 to 5 per thousand, 0.1 to 0.05%. Or 0.5%. It's not going to be a lot. Your newsletter readers oftentimes aren't reading thoughtfully, and their level of curiosity and interest in you and your business may not rise to the level of investing in your business. Your social media followers, similarly, some of your social media followers almost certainly are bots. Others are people who have may passed away, So the reality is the interest level among your social media followers varies dramatically. The more highly engaged your social media followers are, and the bigger your crowd is, of course, the more hopeful you can be. So you've got to be a little bit honest in your assessment. If you have a fairly disengaged social media audience, you're going to be at the lower end of that. 1 or 2 per 1,000 followers may invest a little bit. But if you have a highly engaged audience, lots of comments, lots of likes on all your posts, and you've got really a thriving online community, wow, you may be up at the higher end of that range, but you'd be very unlikely to get more than about 5 per 1,000 social media followers to invest. So after that, you kind of build a budget. You can kind of get an idea of what your crowd will be able to do. I want to point out that even if we're talking about reaching out to people that you can reach organically through a newsletter, through your social media posts, et cetera, et cetera. Some marketing effort is required. And it may be, if you're a solopreneur, that we're talking about your time primarily, and maybe you don't think of that as a cost, but your time is limited, and you need to devote time to that. So you've got to plan for that in your budget, right? What is that time you dedicate to promoting your crowdfunding campaign due to the business and the other things you would normally do with your time? You got to be strategic about this, understand it, but you've got a plan. If you don't market it, you will not raise the capital you need. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of fun now. And this is going to be a little bit tricky for me, just from a technology standpoint to share. But I'm actually going to share on the screen here this is a helpful AI prompt. And this prompt is, let me go back to it here for a second. This prompt is to help clarify the language you might use in describing to your crowd what you're raising capital for. And this process is going to be somewhat iterative. This prompt will not get you the answer. It will get you open a dialogue. And that's the weird thing about AI is it's not like a Google search where you get static answers. You can have a conversation, and this prompt is an opening. It's a conversation starter to allow you to have this conversation. I like to use ChatGPT, but just yesterday, Gemini, the Google Gemini, announced it's got its latest iterations that are now smarter, available to its customers. So Google Gemini may be better. I'm still going to use ChatGPT because I'm more familiar with it, but Microsoft Copilot could help you with these things. There are lots of great AI tools out there. You don't have to use ChatGPT, but that's kind of been my favorite. Okay, so let me see if I can make this work here. So we've got our first prompt. I've got it already queued up here in the window. Let's see if I can make this a little bit more readable. You may not get to readable on this screen, but let me change this here so you can see it. So now you can read the text. And I've customized this a little bit for a hypothetical business that I always dream of starting, a vegan restaurant, right? So I've customized this prompt for the purposes of my hypothetical vegan restaurant. So now we'll hit go and see what ChatGPT says in response. So ChatGPT is going to take a minute to think about this, not a full minute. It's going to take a few seconds. It's taking an unusual number of seconds today. Here we go. So it's given me a full draft, right, of the description we could put in our crowdfunding campaign for how we will use the kitchen to expand and grow our business by expanding and growing and improving our kitchen. So, and then I also had said we're going to add a part-time marketing person. And then we've got to cover the cost of the crowdfunding campaign. So this is going to give us, and let me tell you that the more information you give ChatGPT or Google Gemini or any of the others about your business in your prompt, the more accurate, the more helpful it will be. So now we've got a 300 or 400 word description that we can copy verbatim. Now, depending on how you draft your prompt, you may get more questions, you may get a draft that you can't use. It's iterative, so you can just go back and ask more questions or ask ChatGPT or Google Gemini to revise the work to be a little bit different. If it missed the point or you forgot to give it some particular detail, you can try that. Now, let's go on to our next prompt. This is an important one, right? You want some ideas for additional funding sources to complement the crowdfunding campaign. So you don't have to rely entirely on the crowdfunding campaign. So let's ask ChatGPT for some ideas. And I'm going to give it the hypothetical vegan restaurant idea again. Let's see what it says. So here's that prompt. Got that in here. So I'm going to hit send, and it'll ponder for a minute. Okay, so it's suggesting grants. So there is a small grant available. I'm in California, and ChatGPT knows that. So it suggests the California Restaurant Foundation's Resilience Fund. So the California Office of Small Business Advocate, what a mouthful, also has a grant program. I had no idea about these things. So there are a couple of grants. Then SBA loans, it talks about some of the specifics for the SBA loans that become, it suggests that there are angel groups. Beyond Impact Advisors is a specific one that may be interested in a plant-based restaurant. Angel List may be an idea. It suggests preparing a business plan to help figure that, networking with, so it's got some great specific ideas. Networking is something that it can't do for you, but it can help you if you wanted to drill down and say, help me figure out where the vegan community is near me, how I can engage with that community. And it can help you do that sort of thing. But, writing a business plan, wow, preparing a comprehensive business plan, ChatGPT could help you put together a business plan that might normally take you 50 hours in 3 to 5 hours. And you put together a great, detailed, comprehensive business plan with the help from ChatGPT if you want to have that as a resource. So it really is a game changer. Okay, let's go on to the next prompt. I want to share this with you. And so this is a fun way that ChatGPT can help, because ChatGPT can read a document and help you understand a lot of things about it. So one of the things that I'm going to ask ChatGPT to do is to read a bank application, a bank loan, a commercial loan application that I found online, and ask it whether my startup vegan business might be a good fit for this loan. Okay, so let's go to that now. So now we're going to ask it for kind of an independent analysis. So I've uploaded the commercial loan application, and cool thing is ChatGPT, at least with the paid version I'm using, $20 a month, I can upload 10 documents at a time and ask it to read the documents and give me insights about each one. So here, I've attached this, I've added the prompt, I've edited the prompt to suggest our hypothetical vegan business, to say, okay, is this gonna work for my business? And it's reading the document, it's thinking about this. So it's asking for some additional information, right? And so this is going to help us figure out uh, what if this is a good plan for us. So we've got the great business plan ideas here. It needs to know a lot more information, like how much money do we think we need? All these details here. So as we go through, we can have an iterative conversation with ChatGPT about all of these things, and it can help us really come to understand whether or not we're a good fit. And so think about the hours you might spend preparing a full-on, ready to submit application, maybe a whole package with attached documents and things that you would take to a bank or submit online. And now you can cut some of that time out by giving succinct answers, have that interaction with ChatGPT, who's not going to threaten you in any way, not going to intimidate you, but will give you an honest assessment and help you see whether you're a good candidate or how you could become a good candidate for the loan. And so you begin to see that it's really a helpful tool in this process. So let's go on. I'm going to show you one more prompt. So this application was pretty basic, and so I didn't have a great example, but with a grant application especially, right? You're going to have some long essay questions that require some real thought. And you can ask ChatGPT to help you write your responses so that you don't have to rely on your own ability. But for this commercial loan application, there was a question I wanted to ask ChatGPT to help me respond to, and it was just the purpose of the credit request. And my answer is pretty rudimentary, right? I told it that I want the money to upgrade the kitchen in my startup vegan restaurant. Okay, that's my answer. And I could just put that on the little application form, but let's see what ChatGPT expands that idea into when I ask. And depending on the application, it may be really helpful to have a longer, more professional sounding response than the first idea that comes to mind, or the language, the basic language that you might come up with. So this came up with a fairly succinct language for that, which is perfectly appropriate for this form. I could probably just cram this language onto the space on that particular form to answer it. So it really is, this ChatGPT is just a really powerful tool for really all aspects of crowdfunding, including this process of trying to figure out the budget, the capital requirements. And so I encourage you to lean into that a little bit, to let ChatGPT do some of the hard work and to give you a little bit of objective, friendly advice, right? That, it has the great ability to be both polite, respectful, and at the same time honest, to help you make an assessment like this in a way that's not nearly so intimidating as calling a banker and saying, hey, can I have a loan? So here's the bottom line. When you do a crowdfunding campaign and you're going to go through all the difficult steps of a raise to complete a regulated investment crowdfunding raise, you're going to be promising, you're selling securities. This is an investment. Oh my gosh, this is a big deal. It's a lot of work. I want you to be able to feel when you're done like this has been successful for you. And so I want you to feel like you have raised enough money. Okay. So let's be thoughtful, strategic. Budget twice, raise once. And again, let me remind you that my book, Crowdfunding Made Simple, a step-by-step guide to raising capital using AI tools, is available as a download for free right here. Just hit 4sc.fund/CMS free or scan this QR code to get your free copy of this book. It's also available in print if you want to go to like bookshop.org and buy a copy there. You certainly can. But I encourage you just to get that download, that free download, and take advantage of the opportunity to get some real quality advice. You know, the things that we've talked about today, including the prompts, the AI prompts, they're in the book. So I encourage you to utilize that as a resource. Now, I'm happy to take some questions. Our producer Chandan is here with us. Chandan, do we have any questions that have come in? Okay, so Amanda Greer is asking, what are the biggest mistakes founders make when setting funding goals for a crowdfunding campaign? Boy, this is a great question, Amanda. That the most common problem I see is that entrepreneurs tend to get a little bit clever with the process and set very low minimums. Sometimes somebody who is hoping to raise $5 million will set a minimum goal of $5,000. And they're obviously saying to themselves, well, if I raise any money at all, that's great. And I would argue it's not great. There are so many obligations and costs associated with raising capital. One of the ways that you can avoid some of those costs is by not closing the round if you don't raise enough money. You're not going to pay your portal most of its fees, generally speaking, if you don't close the round. And one of your key points of leverage for that is to set the minimum high enough that you don't close the round until you're happy you did. And so that's an important principle. It's much rarer, but still possible to raise too much. And let me walk you through how that can happen. But if you are going to be paying interest at, say, 12% on a 3-year note, and you raise more than you need to upgrade your kitchen and hire your new marketing part-time person to grow your business, and you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, my customers are excited, they want to help us, so we'll just take a little bit of extra money. What you have to ask yourself is, can you really repay that money? You'll spend it. It's really hard not to spend money when people give it to you. Maybe you're a better person than I am, but it's hard not to spend the money when they give it to you. And so the money will be gone and won't be there really to pay people back, but they will expect not only to get the money back, but with a return on it. And your plans, your budgets may have been built around a lower amount. And so you may struggle to repay the higher amount, even if the business is just as successful as you were expecting. But the additional capital may not have made it more successful proportionally. And so you may have trouble paying back that bigger loan. I will admit that is a rare extreme example, but I want you to recognize the need to right-size your capital raise and make sure that you put real boundaries on your capital raise so that you're not just raising capital willy-nilly. You want to raise enough that you're happy you closed and not take too much so that you've created a burden you can't repay. So that really is the key to, I think, a successful raise. Well, I am really grateful to everybody making the time to tune in today. We're thrilled just to have had you here. I want to encourage you to come back each month. We do a Super Crowd Hour webinar on the third Wednesday of each month. It starts at 1 Eastern, 10 Pacific, and we are here every month. Generally, I will be the one who will do the training. I'll often draw on my books that we've talked about today, how to make money with impact crowdfunding and crowdfunding made simple. Because we're trying to help people learn how to make this space work for them, both as investors and as entrepreneurs. But sometimes we have special guests. We've had some great guests in the past. I encourage you to come back each month to participate in Super Crowd Hour. We welcome your participation and thank you very much for being here today. We'll look forward to seeing you next month.